Okay, everybody, we've got a special show for you today. Of course, this is Brothers Talking NBA Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Ernest Dancy, and this is my special guest. We go way back to the college days. I'm talking early 2000s, before 2005, 2004, early 2000s, real
Mhm.
early 2000s, right? William Martin. His platform, 300 pounds of sports knowledge, is phenomenal and has been phenomenal consistently for a long time. Well,
Listen, it is a pleasure. It's one of those I'll tell a side story real quick. I was prepping my notes today and my wife said, "Do you want to call him and talk to him prior to this?" And I was like, "Babe, I haven't talked to Earn in about 20 years, for give or take, okay? But it's one of those where you know what? You know how somebody's vibe is. And it's just like, it's certain things you don't forget. So it's just like, you know what? Let's just press record and make the magic. That's it.
yep, and we're going to be just fine. We're going to pick up right where we left off at the weight room.
Exactly.
No, perfect. I couldn't agree more, Will.
Hmm.
So I think that this current NBA season has had the most parity of any NBA season I've seen in a long time. Uh Most people's favorite, I guess, is the Nuggets, and
Hmm.
rightfully so, they're the defending champs.
Hmm.
And they've proven that even with the losses of Bruce Brown and Jeff Green, they still have what it takes to defend. It seems like Michael Porter Jr. has gotten better. He actually looks healthy in all actuality. That's what it looks like. He's always been very good. He was a lottery pick and probably would have been the number one pick if he didn't have that back injury and have to have that back surgery. So he's in all actuality doing what he was meant to do. Aaron Gordon, when he was rotting away with the Orlando Magic, I feel like I personally always knew he was not a superstar, but he was a piece that if he was put on a good team, he could be a superstar in his role. And I think those two guys, along with Jamal Murray, also being back to form considerably, he's going to pick it up in the playoffs like he always does. I think that makes up for the losses of Jeff Green and Bruce Brown.
Listen, absolutely, because you look at it with the Nuggets. I don't, I mean, there's always going to be haters out there, people who disagree. And I remember, some of these cats, you know, who are nationally known, that tried to diminish Nikola Jokic's first MVP award. And then once he got that second MVP award, I said, listen, this guy's a Hall of Famer because if you look at the stats, there has never been a player in NBA history win multiple MVP awards and not make the Hall of Fame. The only guys who have not made the Hall of Fame who have multiple MVP awards are the guys who are still playing, like Giannis and LeBron and Steph Curry. So you look at Jokic, and he makes it so easy for the guys around him because honestly, to me, looking at Nikola Jokic, we're seeing what Arvydas Sabonis should have been in the NBA because remember, we got Sabonis when, after he had two bad knees when he finally decided to come to Portland.
Yeah, it was at the
So,
end of his career. It was
right,
essentially
right,
his
right.
career. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I mean, I've never seen a big man from his position be able to pass, from so many different aspects. And it makes life easier for a guy like Aaron Gordon because Aaron Gordon is like tailor made to play off of him. Jamal Murray's out right now, but you figure Jamal Murray's going to be back for the playoffs.
Yep.
And we have seen, and I think the bubble tournament, the bubble playoffs a couple of years ago really showed what Jamal Murray could do on the big stage. And then, of course, last year in the finals. For me, with the Nuggets, I think they're hungry because they want to run it back because they know this is probably going to be it just due to that extra apron
Mm-hmm.
with the salary cap. And the reason why I bring it up, everybody's under contract with the exception of KCP. And, KCP, he's probably going to want his money and he deserves it.
And
Okay.
that's the extremely important part. That he's an
Ex-
extremely important piece.
just ask the Lakers.
Yeah.
because he was on that Laker team when they won a couple of years ago.
Yep.
So you look at that, you got KCP, you got Michael Porter, who I was suspicious about at first. I saw him playing in college at Missouri, but the fact that the Clippers had two picks and Jerry West passed on him twice was like that was very telling for me because Jerry West, this guy knows talent, but he passed on
Mhm.
him twice. But somehow, to the Nuggets' credit, they have gotten it to work. And I look at KCP, he gives him that perimeter defender. You got Jamal Murray, you got Gordon, and then of course you got the big fella in Nikola Jokic, and he's a guy. There's nothing flashy about Nikola Jokic's game,
Oh,
but you know what? To me, it's one of those where you could sit back and say about a superstar, you know what? We need to limit him under 20 points. Jokic can score 17 points and they'll still win. Why? Because he'll have 13 or 14 rebounds. He'll have 14 or 15 assists. And
yep.
it's those assists are the ones that are so painful because he'll be in the post and then he'll just go behind his back. He'll go over his shoulder. He'll kick it back out.
True.
And you know what? Listen, they keep it flowing. So the Nuggets, they are poised. I really do believe they are poised to have a legit shot to go out there and try to run it back.
They do. They do. I agree. And I must admit, I did not think Jokic was going to become what it is that he's become, like at all. I did not see that at all. It looked like a slow, out of shape, unathletic big. That's all he looked like to me, who was awkward.
But
Then who did they trade away? They traded away the big man who used to be on Portland, and now he's the big man for Phoenix.
Yusuf
Nurkic.
Nurkic.
When they traded Nurkic away, because Nurkic was on Denver, right?
Hmm.
When they traded Nurkic away, and then Nikola was the only big man that they had, and it was like, all right, we're putting all of our stock into you. He blossomed. You have a point guard who's essentially a combo guard in the vein of a Kyrie. Not quite um not quite the level that Kyrie is, of course, but that mold. He can get it off the dribble. He can get it catch and shoot. He's actually better moving around without the ball and getting it off the catch and shoot and making a quick decision, right? And like
Hmm.
you said, when you have arguably the greatest passing big man that we've ever seen, Jamal Murray becomes even more of a deadly weapon. Sort of like how Kyrie becomes when he's next to a LeBron. And I don't know how people are surprised about this. Now that he's next to Luka, he's doing the same thing. It's like this is the same Kyrie as the ultimate weapon. He's not a leader, okay? He's not a prototypical point guard. He is a nuclear weapon. And that's what Murray becomes next to Nikola, in my opinion. So yeah, they're unbelievable team, and they've taken on the personality of their fiery coach, Mike Malone. And I liked him ever since he was with Sacramento and he had Boogie. And then they fired Mike Malone when Boogie was actually sick. And they fired him, and Boogie couldn't believe it. I like Mike Malone even since then.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with anything you said right there because Mike Malone, he's been around basketball since he was knee high to a street curve. I mean, you figure his dad, Brendan, was an assistant coach for so many years, coached with the Raptors. And Mike Malone's a New York City guy, and those New York City guys typically, especially basketball guys, they have an additional chip on their shoulders. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? I mean, honestly, it's the New York area guys, whether it's New York, New Jersey, whatever. I mean, just look at you like men's basketball right now with what UConn is doing with Dan Hurley. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think players typically tend to embody the mentality of their head coach. And yeah, Michael Malone could be brash at times. Yeah, he can be tough. But you know what? He goes out there and makes sure that his team backs it up, and his team knows how to go out there and get it done. When the chips are pushed to the middle of the table. I think this championship run for the Nuggets, in all actuality, started back in 2020 in the bubble. Because if you remember that Western Conference Final Series against the Lakers, they started off slow, but once Jokic figured out AD, he started
Mm-hmm.
he started to come on towards the end of that series, but they just ran out of time because they
Yep.
spotted the Lakers that lead. Okay, but since then, you figure the year after that, they got to the playoffs. Injuries to both Porter and Murray, and then Murray didn't play the entire following year. But now they've gotten everybody back, and you know what? They're raring to go. And to me, starting five wise, they are the most complete starting five in the NBA, in my opinion. And getting back to what you had said about Jokic a little while ago, this guy was a second round pick. And it's one of those where this is a classic example of what happens when you scout talent. Okay,
Mhm.
you have good talent evaluators, and more importantly, you develop talent. Because too often we see it in the NBA draft where guys are focused, well, we need the number one pick. Okay, the number one pick is fine, but are you going to go out there and find the right guy to fit your system? Are you going to go out there and develop that guy? Too often, some of these teams, they get caught up in, well, this guy's the best player available, but it doesn't make sense to go out there and draft a point guard if you already have a point guard on your team. So and I think too many teams get caught up in that hype. But in regards to the Nuggets, I think they found the right guy in Jokic. They were patient with him. They developed him because if you look at his first 5 years in the league, his numbers continue to get better offensively,
Mhm.
and then they have done their part to put the right players around them. Remember, a lot of teams passed on Michael Porter Jr. A
A
lot of
lot.
teams passed on Jamal Murray. And honestly, when I see the Nuggets, I think about the Warriors. And the reason is how many teams passed on Steph Curry in round number one? Klay Thompson, I think, went 10th or 11th.
Very true.
Draymond was a second round pick. So people can sit up there and get upset about the Warriors' success, but how many other teams had opportunities to go out there and get these guys? And they were like, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Okay, this guy has a 40-inch vertical. This guy only has a 37-inch
We're
vertical.
gonna,
We're going to go out with the 40-inch vertical.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Very true. Very true. Very true. And now this is the results. Golden State 4 championships later. The Nuggets with a chance to defend their championship, and most of the key players were homegrown. They were from the draft and they were developed. And then you add pieces that fit that culture, and not only that fit that team's culture, but fit the identity of the city. That's another
Absolutely.
that's important. Just like with the Miami Heat, okay, you missed out on Damian Lillard. Okay, Boston got Drew Holiday. There is no better player to be at the point guard position for the Miami Heat, personality wise, than Terry Rozier. He fits that city. He fits Pat Riley and he fits Jimmy Butler perfectly, I think. Um, so much so that, and I know we didn't even get fully into our topics yet, so much so that I think that it may behoove Miami. And I was thinking about this yesterday, right? Especially when I was going through the stats and I saw that Tyler Hero finally came back and he's always hurt. They maybe should keep bringing him off the bench. Maybe. Because in that starting five for the Heat, you have Bam, you have Jimmy, you have Terry Rozier, you have Duncan Robinson to spread the floor for everybody. And at the four, who did they have at the four starting yesterday?
Was it
Uh
what was it the Nikola Jovic kid?
yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
He was at the four.
Hmm.
So coming off the bench, you had Kevin Love, you had Tyler Hero, you have Thomas Bryant. I think he got a DNP yesterday or the
Right.
day, but Thomas Bryant, that's three guns.
Did
You
you did you
have
mention Kevin Love?
yep, I mentioned Kevin Love first.
Okay.
Um, who else do they have? They got that kid Hightower. They got the kid from UCLA who's been a revelation.
Jamie Jaime Jaquez.
Yes.
Hmm.
They have an incredible bench coming in to relieve the starters. And then you have the brain, the basketball intelligence, expertise, and just IQ of Spolstra putting all of that together. The Heat now, with Tyler Hero coming back or being back, the Heat may be more of a problem if they make it out of that play in than they were last season. especially if Tyler Hero is coming off that bench.
Listen,
And that's
I'm sorry.
something where a player who fits like the city's mentality, the whole organization's mentality, like Terry, that changes things. What happens if they match up against the Bucks again? It might be the same outcome, even with a healthy Giannis for the first, 2 games of the series. I think he missed 2 games last season, right? In that first round series.
Hmm.
There's nobody to be slept on. And playoff Jimmy is a real thing.
Listen, I'll tell you the same thing I said last year about Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was basically punking people and he was taking their lunch money. He did it to the Bucks in the first round. He did it to the Knicks in the second round, and then he did it to the Celtics in the conference finals. You know, for me with Miami, first and foremost, I don't think that Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley get the credit that they deserve because you go back about a decade ago when they were winning championships, and everybody just tried to gloss over Eric Spoelstra like he was a water boy because you had LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. But you figure Miami missed the playoffs that first year after LeBron left because a lot of people were hurt. But
Yeah.
they were a playoff team and they've been a playoff team consistently since then. And I think there wasn't a better team, with the exception of when Jimmy Butler played with the Bulls under Thibodeau,
Mm-hmm.
where Jimmy Butler fit because Jimmy Butler didn't fit in Minnesota just due to the
Oh,
fact that they wanted him to be the third guy, behind Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. That wasn't going to work. And it was the same thing when he went to Philly. They wanted him to be the third guy behind Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And of course, Philly picked the wrong guy. They chose Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler. Where would
and
that
what
be?
and Tobias Harris.
Right,
Didn't they? Yeah,
right,
that was part
right,
of the
right,
decision too, getting
right.
Tobias Harris more money.
Right. Okay. And like Jimmy left and he went to Miami. You figure, you know, those Marquette guys, especially those Marquette guys that played for Buzz Williams, they were cut a little bit different. Okay. And Jimmy came into the league with a chip on his shoulder. And then you figure, you know, if you went to Marquette after Dwayne Wade went there, Dwayne Wade is like a god to you. So,
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne Wade is hands down the best player in Heat history. Nobody's ever going to dispute that,
Yep.
right now. So, all Dwayne Wade's got to do is talk to Jimmy Butler. I'm like, hey, listen, you come down here. This dude fits Miami's system under Pat Riley like a glove because, for all of the Armani wear and stuff like that, a lot of cats don't remember. Pat Riley was a tough, grizzled, defensive minded guy.
Yep.
They think about the Showtime Lakers of the 80s or whatever
They
like that.
forget all about the Knicks era
Exactly.
and the
Okay.
Miami era
E-
with Zoe and Tim Hardaway.
Exactly. So, Pat Riley's a tough-minded guy. And, Jimmy Butler fits that mold. And if you look at that team last year, it wasn't pretty. There was a whole bunch of greasy cats out there that were just going out there and playing. And it was the same thing that they did when they got to the bubble. To me, some teams are just built for the playoffs. And I think that's Miami right now. They're just a team that's built for the playoffs. And to your point, if they're in that play-in, they could be scary again, regardless, if they're in that play-in or not. They're a team that a lot of teams don't want to face. And I mean, you look at Milwaukee, Milwaukee's having a lot of issues right now.
A
And
lot.
honestly, Milwaukee, for my money, hasn't been right since they fired Mike Budenholzer last year because I thought the move was a panic move
It was.
because you figure you didn't have a healthy Giannis last year in the playoffs, just like the year before. They probably would have gotten back to the finals had Middleton not gotten hurt with
Exactly.
with the knee injury. So now you fire, Coach Bud, as they call him in Milwaukee. You bring in Adrian Griffin, but then you fire him after 43 games. So
30
that
and 13. The
right.
man was 30 and 13.
So that tells me that you didn't do your due diligence on this guy if basically his style of defense was clashing with what your best players are comfortable with. That right there to me falls on the front office. That's number one. You then sacrifice your defense further by getting rid of Drew Holiday for Dame because Dame ain't gonna play D like Drew Holiday, and Drew Holiday is a legit point guard. Right now, we've got too many guys who are listed as point guards that are not point guards.
The
Drew
combo.
Holiday, Right. Drew Holiday is a point guard. He's a ball
Yep.
handler. He's a facilitator. And if you remember, that team changed once they got Drew Holiday. They
Yeah, once
became a
he got,
championship after that. Okay.
because he was the defensive point of attack. He
Right.
was one.
Right.
Was Lopez was not known as
No.
no defender until Drew got there, and then he was up for defensive player of the year all of a
And
sudden.
and then on that championship team too, they had PJ Tucker as well.
Yeah,
Something that, flies under the radar. So, you push the panic button, and typically when we see a team fire a head coach mid-season like the Bucks did, usually it's to bring, like, you promote an assistant coach, somebody within that system. Now you're going out of the system and bringing in a brand new coach in Doc Rivers. Doc, okay, you can say what you want. A lot of people are going to pile on Doc as far as his shortcomings in the playoffs, and there's a lot of them. But
mm-hmm.
for me, it's one of those where you're doing a disservice to everybody, head coach and players included, because Doc needs an off season,
True.
okay, to implement his system, to get a feel of his players, vice versa. They're trying to do this on the fly, and it's not working out right now because you figure right now the Bucks have lost 5 of their last 6. Their last 3 losses have been to 3 of the worst teams in the NBA. They just lost to Toronto last night at home, a Toronto team that had lost their previous 15. They lost to Memphis and they lost to Washington. So, and let's not forget, they lost to the Lakers without LeBron.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so
They
it's
can't
so it's
keep
one.
out of the lane. They can't keep anybody from getting
No,
in the lane and wreaking havoc.
no, and it's like they got too much size in that team, but everybody is offensive oriented. It's like Giannis has a potential to be a solid defender with his length. They're not utilizing that because, unfortunately, in this era, everybody all we focus on is offensive
Mm,
stat. Thank you, analytics. And you
yep.
look at Brook Lopez. You think about Brook Lopez's career when he first came into the league with the Nets. Brook Lopez was a back to the basket guy, but of course the analytics have changed him, and now he's just become a glorified small forward.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, they're not playing to their strengths, and I think you have a combination of that as well as a head coach who consistently comes up short in the
Yep.
postseason. I think Milwaukee's about to get their feelings hurt once again. I really do.
Again. Again. And they thought that Jay Crowder was the Jay Crowder of old, so that he would help soften the blow of losing Drew Holiday's defensive flexibility. He he's not the same Jay Crowder that he was before. So that didn't work. Patrick Beverly is hurt now. And I don't know if it's his off hand or his right hand in which he has the injured wrist.
Mhm.
But if he does come back for the playoffs, okay, maybe he'll be able to pester other guards defensively. But offensively, they're literally just going to leave him wide open and say, we want to see what you can do with that weak wrist. I want to see if you can hit the three ball. I believe it's his shooting hand. I
Mhm.
believe the wrist on his shooting hand. I think they're in a world of trouble, especially with a head coach that has shown a lack of an ability to make adjustments in the playoffs.
Listen, I mean, I listen. I think you're 100% right. I have no faith, in the Bucks. I talked about this once they fired Adrian Griffin and brought in Doc Rivers. Honestly, almost fell out of my chair laughing that day when I heard the news. And if you went around social media, the bulk of the reaction, the bulk of the comments were negative towards the Bucks because it's like, we've seen enough of Doc and
Enough.
no disrespect to him, but it's one of those where like Doc, is living off of a championship for more than
One.
15, yeah, for more than 15 years ago. And I mean, let's be realistic. Look how many Hall of Famers are going to come out of that team. You
Yo.
figure KG, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Rondo is probably going to end up
Yep.
in the
And
basketball Hall of Fame as well. So it's one of those where, everybody's trying to give, at that time was trying to give Doc the credit, but it's kind of like whether it was Doc Rivers as a head coach in Orlando, Doc Rivers with the Celtics, Doc Rivers with the Clippers, Doc Rivers with the Sixers, and now Doc Rivers with the Bucks. It's one of those where, bro, you basically just add water and mix. You know what's gonna happen. Come May, they're
we've
gonna
seen
come
this
up.
movie before. We've seen this movie before. And didn't that Boston team even have a young Tony Allen coming off the bench, like being
Tony
a
Allen, Tony
on
Allen, Sam Cassell, PJ Brown. Those are some of the role players
small
on
forward that won the championship in Miami.
Eddie House was on that team.
Was on there. I forget his name. His name escapes me. I believe he played for Xavier.
David,
Um,
not James Posey.
Wasn't Posey on that squad too?
Yes, yes, he was. Yes, he was. He was. He was. So that I mean that Celtics team was loaded. Okay. And it was just Doc's job to kind of like manage the personalities, you know what I'm saying? You had a young Kendrick Perkins, you name it. And it's just like
Yep,
you look at it now, the talent that he's had with the Clippers, the talent that he had with the Sixers. But again, like we said before, with that Sixers team, they chose the wrong guy. They chose Jimmy Butler, they chose Tobias Harris rather than Ben Simmons over Jimmy Butler.
oh,
And if, and it, yeah, and if they had kept Jimmy, we might be talking about, things, much
differently.
different. Oh, absolutely. And speaking of the Sixers, in my opinion, I do believe they could be like an enigma, if you will, in the playoffs right now because you got Embiid back, and it's one of those where he scored, I think, 24 points the other night in
In the
29.
first game back,
Yeah, and I'm like, how healthy is he going to be? That's the big thing. But if you get Embiid back, even if it's like a 75% of a Joel Embiid, because
mhm,
Tyrese Maxey has been doing his thing. Uh,
problem. He is
yes,
a problem.
yes. So I'm like, if you can get Embiid back, I think Philly could be a problem for a lot of teams in the East.
Mhm. And you know who else I like? Who
Mhm.
was a great pickup, in my opinion, in the offseason for them? And he
Mhm.
seems to have recovered from that bike accident he was in. Kelly Oubre.
Yes. Yeah.
I like Kelly Oubre on that team and that Nick Nurse system. He's another guy. This is a
Kelly
coach. They barely give Nick Nurse any credit.
Kelly Oubre is a guy that you could not pay attention, and that dude will have a quiet 15 points very
Yes.
quietly. And Nick Nurse is another guy. Um, Unfortunately, he never got a chance to run it back because Kawhi bounced, so we don't
Yep.
know what could have been. But they had a championship squad there in Toronto, and they wanted to go young, and they let him go. And now he goes to Philly. Listen, I'm telling you, Philly could be a dangerous team. It's one of those where there's no slam dunk to me in the East because I look at Boston. Boston has all of the talent in the world. I don't believe in their head coach. Also, I think Boston is too perimeter oriented. They focus too much on the three ball.
Oh, hey,
And
so let's get right to it then. What do
yeah,
you think about the top four teams in the conferences as this postseason approaches? So, all right, so right now we're on Boston.
I don't listen. I don't. The Celtics will probably win the East, but it's one of those. I don't believe in them as far as winning the championship. To me, I think the only way they win a championship is, let's say they get to the finals. They don't have to face the Celtics. I mean the Clippers and Nuggets or the Lakers. I
Hmm.
think I think that's the only way that they are able to win it if they don't face those three teams because Austin's problem is they're too perimeter oriented. You bring in Drew Holiday, that's a phenomenal pickup.
Yep.
You bring in Kristaps Porzingis, a phenomenal pickup. But the Celtics bread is still buttered with Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. The problem is with both of these guys, they rely on the 3-point shot too much. Jason Tatum and Jalen
Like
Brown are not consistent 3-point shooters.
sidestep fadeaway three. It's like,
No.
come on, dude. Both of y'all.
No. Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum are at their best when they're playing the post and they're getting to the basket. And, it's one of those where this era of basketball, everybody has fallen in love with the 3-point shot due to the analytics. And it just it just irks me because I'll see a three, and I'm sure you're the same way. You'll see the 3-on-1 fast break developing. Everybody's stopping at the 3-point line. I'm
Point.
like, listen, get to the basket.
Get the layup, the dunk.
Listen, you've played ball before. You know when you've got that fast break and you're bringing the ball up, what do you want to do? You want to put the pressure on that one defender and get the
Exactly.
easy basket. Instead, these guys are taking the 3-point shot, missing it, and then it's like now the defender.
It's leading
I
to a long rebound and another fast break for the opposite team.
listen when I'm sure you probably feel the same way for what I'm about to say. When I watch basketball now, it reminds me of when we played intramurals in college. We had 10 dudes on the court. Okay, we were running back and forth. Okay, and it was basically whoever got the ball, they were gunning from wherever they were. Okay, that's what I'm seeing right now. These guys, they're like the fundamentals have gone. I know like guys want to say, well, the game today, the players are better. No, they're more athletic.
Mhm.
They're not more skilled. It's a difference. Okay. So this is why I think, people need to be very careful when they start to compare players from one era to another era. Because I mean, how many times do we see a game right now and guys walk and they don't call anything?
Very true.
You
Yes,
know,
all the time.
you got guys, they don't know how to play, how to defend the pick and roll. There's zero communication defensively. You're giving the offensive guy too much space. They don't know how to pick up defense in the backcourt. They don't know how to pick up, half at half court. It's a lot of it's so much flaws into the game. And like getting back to the Celtics, you see it with them because they rely on the 3-point shot too much. And I think at the end of the day, that is going to be their downfall. If the Celtics get to the finals and play the Nuggets, they will lose. Number one, you don't have anybody to stop Jokic. Number two, every single time that Jason Tatum plays KCP, he is non-existent. Jason Tatum has to work like he never worked before just to get 20 points when he faces KCP. So those
So
two,
that, right? Just like what you said previously. Now, what would happen if you put 6'8", 6'9" Jason Tatum in the post? And now KCP had to deal with him. It's like, doesn't that make much more sense than you have Jason Tatum trying to take KCP off the dribble to get to his pull up sidestep three? KCP is going to be all over that. Just
exactly.
stated, they're 2 3 point perimeter happy instead of putting those boys in the post, right? Where they can even turn face up and then put pressure on the rim.
Yeah,
And
oh
then
yeah.
get Jokic in foul trouble. You know what I'm saying? Force them to have to bring DeAndre Jordan in.
Yeah,
But no, they're going to take bad 3 pointers. That's what they're going to do.
yeah, listen, I mean, they got a shot to win the East. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but they have a shot depending on who they don't have to face because if they have to face a Miami in round one, or they got to face a Philly in round number one, that could be a huge problem. That's why, I'm looking at the top four teams in the East right now, and I'm not sold. And especially, so much stuff is interchangeable because you've got Cleveland there at number three, but then
Mm-hmm.
both the Magic and the Knicks are a half game behind both of them.
Yeah,
And
they're both 45 and 32. Yep.
right. And you look at the Magic, nobody's really talking about them. They've flown under the radar. The Knicks, I know in New York, the folks there, they're probably going crazy because, Knick fans, they're kind of like a different breed. They're kind of like
Mm-hmm.
Dallas Cowboys fans. When their team gets good, you can't tell them anything.
No, we're winning the championship.
Exactly. But, you look at the Knicks, they just found out that Julius Randle is not coming back. They weren't a championship team if Randle did come back. Jalen Brunson is tearing it up. That might be the steal of all time in free
Mm-hmm.
agency. But my scariest thing with the Knicks, their head coach is Tom Thibodeau. Tom
He's going
Thibodeau, he
to
does
them.
not believe in his bench. And how much are his guys like Jalen Brunson, like Jason Hart, how much are those guys going to have in the tank when the playoffs roll around? That's my big thing with the Knicks.
And the way that he's going to play them from here on out, those three Villanova guys, right?
Hmm.
Devin Hart, right? Jalen Brunson. All right, they might make it out the first round, right?
Hmm.
It'll be a hard fought second round, and then they'll lose. He puts them at risk for injury next season.
Yeah.
The way he's going to run these guys into the ground. We saw it with Derrick Rose. We saw it with Joakim Noah. We've seen this story before. We saw it with Jimmy Butler in Minnesota.
Right.
We've seen this. This is not so what you're saying is 100% accurate, but it could affect them for next season.
Listen, it's one of those where I think the Knicks being relevant is good for New York City. It's also good for the NBA. It's
Yep.
good, to have important games at Madison Square Garden in the spring. Madison Square Garden is a special place when it comes to basketball. And of course, the folks in the Big Apple right now, they're happy that both the Knicks and Rangers are doing good. So it makes it
Yeah.
doubly, good for the Garden. But it's one of those where with the way that they are, I still think the Knicks need another guy. You know what I'm saying? If they're gonna take that next step as a team, as a franchise, as an organization, they need another guy. And even speaking of Randall, even when he's healthy, I think he's a guy who unfortunately has become too perimeter oriented as well,
Way too
trying
much.
trying trying to keep up with the Joneses. I feel like Julius Randle is a perfect guy that he would have flourished if he played alongside of Gary Payton or Jason Kidd or Magic Johnson because
Mhm.
those guys would have always set him up to get him the basketball. But I think, a guy like him, like taking 3-point shots, I think the worst thing for the Knicks is when he does play. If Julius Randle hits a 3-pointer early,
Oh, it's over. He's
right,
gonna be happy the whole game.
exactly, exactly.
It's the worst thing that happened to the Knicks is when he actually hits them early.
hmm Yeah. So like so that's my thing with the Knicks. I'm with you. I think they can win a series, but it's just like I'm not sold on them. Cleveland, I look at Cleveland and honestly, I feel like Cleveland's not built for the playoffs. The way that their team is structured. And I
That
think,
backcourt is too small, and
yeah,
that front court is too big.
right. And I feel like it's only a matter of time before, your man Donovan Mitchell gets frustrated because he didn't he didn't want to go there in reality. He really
He
wanted
wanted
to
to
go
get,
right. And he's not going to be there now since they got Jalen Brunson. But maybe the Nets try to make a play at him, to get him to New York City. But it's just one of those where I just certain teams are built for the regular season. Some certain teams are built for the postseason, like Miami, like the
mm,
Lakers. We could get to them in a moment as well. But Cleveland, I think, I really do. I think Cleveland, could be one and done again. I think what has changed a lot of things in the East this year. Number one, the Embiid injury, and then
mm-hmm.
and then secondly, the turmoil between the Bucks. Because you figure in reality, it was supposed to be the Bucks, Celtics, and the
Philly.
six, yeah, and you could flip it around in whatever
Mm-hmm.
order that you wanted to flip it around as far
Yep.
as being the top three. But those things have really factored into things. I don't think that anybody expected Orlando
To
to
be
be
doing what they're doing.
right. And then you look at Indiana, they picked up Pascal Siakam. You've got
Huge.
you've
That was
got you got Tyrese Halliburton, a phenomenal point guard. You've got Miles Turner, but I can't get behind Indiana because they play zero defense. You
mm-hmm.
you can't sit up there and score 125 points and still lose. And that's what they do. So, I don't believe in them, but I'm just looking at it. I mean, the Bulls are in the play-in. I think, the Bulls, for me, it's been the same old song. A couple of years ago, before the Lonzo Ball injury, they had the best record in the East.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think the Bulls have,
I
they
feel for that kid too. I feel for that kid.
it's unfortunate because I think he had finally found the right team and
Yep.
he was finally figuring it out. And now you've got DeRozan and you still got Zach LaVine because Zach LaVine has been injured. But the Bulls, they're just finding a way. But it's just like they're just there for the for the ride.
Yeah.
So I look at it. I'm looking at the teams that possibly could come out of that play-in. I'm looking at Miami if they're in there. I'm
Yep.
looking at Philly, and I think. Listen, let's for the sake of argument, if you tell me that Miami's a 7 seed,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and then you tell me Philly is an 8 seed, we might get March Madness in the NBA. It would not surprise me,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
to see either one of them get past the first round.
No, it would not surprise me at all. It would not surprise me. And I'm a with that how the play-in tournament looks like it's gonna shake out in the East, right? Now this
Hmm.
sounds crazy, right? But it's working out exactly how I wanted it to play out because personally, I want Trey Young in San Antonio with Wembanyama. That's where
Hmm.
I want Trey Young at, right? DeJounte Murray has had Atlanta balling. They've been killing. It would not surprise me if it no, well, they would have to win 2 games in the play-in, right? To advance. Now
Hmm.
they're capable of winning 2 games. If they were the seventh or the eighth seed and all they had to win was 1 game, they
Hmm.
might have made it into the playoffs. But Atlanta has been a revelation coming down the stretch as far as getting into the play-in and winning, even though their all-star has been missing the past couple of weeks.
Well,
I like what they're doing down there.
I think it's better that he's been out, and the reason why I say it is this is because when you have DeJounte Murray and Trey Young together, they're too ball oriented. And I
Mm-hmm.
think now this gives the opportunity for other guys to get involved because it doesn't make sense if you've got two guys taking 60 shots a game and then it's like 20 shots for everybody else. Now we're getting an opportunity to move the basketball around and get other players involved. So I think that's going to be good uh,
Yep.
for Atlanta. But at the end of the day, I still think Quinn Snyder is trying to figure out long term who's going to be there for him. This because like he came in midseason last year, and like
Mm-hmm. But
now
McMillan, he took over for
right,
McMillan.
right,
Mm-hmm.
right. So now he's still trying to figure out, his pieces and stuff like that. But I look at the Hawks. I think they're good enough for the play-in. Can they win a game? Yeah, but it's one of those. If they get out of the play-in, am I fearful of them?
No,
If I'm in Milwaukee or Boston, absolutely not.
no, no,
Absolutely not.
no.
I
With just Clint Capella down there, no,
nah, nah,
no,
nah, nah,
no way
nah.
in the world.
Nah,
Yeah,
you trying to get Clint Capella to stop Giannis. Nah, that's not gonna happen.
yeah,
But
and he's not stopping Kristaps. You know,
absolutely,
so
absolutely not.
not happening, not happening.
But
So
like for me, like the real interesting playing aspect also is the West because it's one of those where the Lakers are there, the Warriors are there.
New Orleans,
Right. And the Lakers have been playing some good ball, but it's just the fact that the West is so deep, the Lakers haven't really been able to come up. They finally got a chance because of the injuries in Sacramento with Kevin Herter and Malik Monk.
yep,
You could take your pick and say, okay, which injury is bigger for Sacramento? Because, again, just ask the Lakers how important Malik Monk was
yep,
coming off that bench in that championship year.
exactly.
So, so that has changed things. But now, just being that
Malik
the
was probably he was arguably front runner for 6 man this year before
absolutely,
arguably.
listen to me, I think he's a modern day Jamal Crawford, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those where the Lakers just passed Sacramento in the standings because Sacramento has been slipping. So the Lakers are actually eighth right now. That's big because let's like peel it back for a moment. We were looking at the Lakers being ninth, Golden State being 10th. So
Mm-hmm.
either LeBron or Steph was going to be done after one game without even getting,
Yep.
into the postseason. So now you put the Lakers in a situation where they possibly could play New Orleans now. That's a more winnable game for LA. And then Golden State possibly catching, an injured Sacramento team. I don't know. It could happen. But like again, if you're Golden State, Steph could have one off night and then, you're done for. And I'll tell you the same thing I've been saying on my podcast for a while. Golden State's problem is they're still trying to win with the style that they won the championships with, but the league has caught up to them. Okay,
Yep.
age and injuries have caught up to them. They don't have the same depth like they once did. So it's just like you gotta try to change the format, but they're not gonna do that because it's kind of like, well, if you're Golden State, how do you tell these guys to adjust? You really can't afford to sit up there and have Steph Curry gunning 14 or 15 threes a night anymore. And it's the same thing with Klay Thompson. They had
Yep.
bench Klay at one point until, injuries brought him back into the starting lineup. Draymond, he's not the player that he once was. And of course, when you get Draymond, you got to deal with all the other antics. And honestly, at the end of the day, the only reason Draymond does what he does is because somebody has not turned around and checked that chin. That's
Yep.
that like because I mean I'm looking at Draymond. I can't imagine him trying that with somebody like Kenyon Martin. I
Or
can't
Isaiah
imagine.
Stewart for Detroit. He would have never
Oh,
did
oh no, 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 no,
this
no.
in Detroit. Yep.
No, no,
I,
Draymond does what he does against people that he knows he can get away with that.
mhm.
He would have never tried that with Rasheed Wallace or Kevin Garnett.
No,
No.
no.
So, so that's my thing. I'm not sold on Golden State. The Lakers though, wow. I feel like that team is either feast or famine because it wouldn't surprise me to see the Lakers not get out of the play-in tournament, but it also would not surprise me to see the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals either.
Again,
Yeah, again. But I think it all comes down to Anthony Davis because which Anthony Davis are we gonna see? And at the end of the day, some people are gonna roast me for that. It's what I'm about to say, but it's all good. To me, I think the Lakers play better without LeBron.
that's because when LeBron is not on the court, you get full on D'Angelo Russell with confidence to be who he was when he was with the Nets that All-Star season. That's probably the reason. But what I have noticed recently, as of late, like the past 3 weeks, is he's playing better. He's improved with his minutes that he shares with LeBron.
Hmm.
It's that started to gradually improve because just like you were saying, Anthony Davis is probably like the key. Like however he goes, they go.
Hmm.
As long as he stays healthy, the only question would be when he goes up against Jokic. I think there is no other question against anybody else.
Right.
And I think the key is how D'Angelo Russell performs because he's another one who in the postseason does like a disappearing act.
Yes.
If he gives you this 18-7 that he's giving you now in the regular season, if he gives you 17-6 in the playoffs, they could be a problem. And I believe Brandon Ingram is still out, right? For New
Yeah,
Orleans.
he's still out. He's still out. And I think that's the biggest thing
Mm-hmm.
about the Pelicans. They have the talent, but their big guns, a la Zion and Brandon Ingram, they just have been unable to stay healthy. That
And on
that that that, that is the biggest thing.
extended amount of games. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that means the only mid-range guy they got is CJ, right?
Right.
Yeah, he's the only mid-range guy they got. No Brandon. Yeah, he's the only mid-range guy they got. And in the playoffs, the pace slows down.
Hmm.
So you can't get to your mid-range. Only CJ could get to the mid-range. I don't think you could beat the Lakers if you're not shooting lights out from three
Hmm.
and you can't consistently eat off the mid-range. I don't think they could beat the Lakers.
No, I mean the Lakers to me, I think is one of those where if they end up, being an early exit from the playoffs, I think they're going to look back to post in season tournament because I feel like the Lakers went all out, for that in season tournament to win, and they kind of like put it on cruise control, and everybody was gunning for them after that, and they lost a lot of games off of that, and it's like
Yep.
now they find themselves right.
Yep.
So it's one of those where it could still come back to hurt them. We have to wait and see. They've got the talent. I think the Lakers' problem is kind of like I think they're more built for the playoffs than they are the
Yes.
regular season. But then also, I feel like at times they feel like they could just turn it on when they have to, and sometimes it's easier said than done. I mean, you look at the West this year. The West is deep. The Clippers have been somewhat healthy.
Yep.
Nobody really expected what we're seeing out of both OKC and Minnesota,
Oh,
Especially Minnesota now without Karl Anthony Towns, and is still like vying for the top spot. So
hey,
that
now we know why. Well, I think we knew why before they wanted to re-sign Nas Reed. I personally don't think he should have re-signed with them. He could have got more money somewhere else and been a
oh,
permanent.
absolutely,
But that's why that was such a great move. Them being able to re-sign Nas Reed. He's not pitched to the same level as Karl Anthony Towns, but he stretches the floor just like Carl,
Hmm.
plays just like Carl. He's not the scorer that Carl Anthony Towns is, not to that degree, but he's sufficient enough that
Hmm.
when Anthony Edwards is going nuts, when Mike Conley is at least giving you 11 and like 8 assists and being steady at that point guard spot, they got the young boy at the small forward position playing D. He's guarding multiple positions.
Right.
Gobert doing his job, his normal regular season job that he does until he gets to the playoffs.
Right.
Um, yeah, they're they're surprising. They're they're really surprising. Ant-Man, his summertime carried over to the regular season, and now he really believes that he's the best in the league. He thinks he's the best in the league, and it's lovely to watch it.
No, trust me, Anthony Edwards, he's got, he's got some toughness in him. He's got a dog in him, okay? And it's one of those, to me, I think it started last year in the playoffs when they lost to the Nuggets, because it was like they lost to the Nuggets in 5 games, but it wasn't because of Anthony Edwards. And like, I've been saying this for a couple of years. The problem is like Karl Anthony Towns has plays too soft. That's
He did not
and,
want to get
and
his butt down in the post, and
no,
then Gobert gave him more of an excuse to be
yep.
more perimeter oriented. I'm the best shooting big man ever. Yo, dude, please go down low, dude. Please go down low.
Just like we talked about Julius Randle with the Knicks, to me, the worst thing that happened for the Timberwolves was when Karl Anthony Towns won that 3-point contest at the All Star game. Because now, all of a sudden, he wants to be Reggie Miller and all this other stuff, and that's not his game. I put Cat, I put Embiid, I put Giannis, and I put AD in the same category. When these guys focus on playing 15 feet and in, there's nobody in the NBA that can stop them.
You can't
Okay,
stop.
and we've seen it more from Giannis this year. Okay,
Mhm.
and when Doc Rivers got to Philly, he cut down on the amount of threes that Embiid was taking, and even going back to Frank Vogel cut down on the amount of threes that AD was taking, and when AD decides to play the post, and when AD decides to play D, there's not a lot of guys better than him in the NBA at his position. And I look at the
Yeah,
Timberwolves,
there's the only two. There's only Giannis and Embiid, arguably good
that's it.
even, especially not on the defensive end. Yes,
Listen,
it's an Embiid.
Jokic is like Dirk.
Yep.
You bring him in for what he does offensively, but we need a bigger guy, another big to play off of him in order to play D. You remember for a
Mhm.
while with Dallas, it was the Sansa Job, Brendan Hayward. Then
Yes.
finally, when they won the championship, it was
Mm-hmm.
Tyson Chandler. You
Tyson
know,
Chandler.
right? So, and that's what Denver has done as well. But as far as like being a total package, guys like AD and guys like Embiid, you can't stop those guys. And I mean, Karl Anthony Towns has the potential to be a lot better. But
But
I
he
think
refused.
exactly. And I think that's what is going to restrict Minnesota from taking that next step as an organization. We're talking about a Timberwolves team that has only been out of the first round once,
Yeah.
okay, in franchise history. That was in 2004 when they made the Western Conference Finals. And of course,
That
they
was
had that.
Garth Sprewell and Sam Cassell, right?
That is correct. And they had that long stretch without even making the postseason, finally got back there. And, it's one of those getting to the playoffs is fine, but trying to take that next step, that's what changes an organization. I know
Mm-hmm.
A-Rod is a part of that new ownership group, and they're trying to change the culture around that team in Minneapolis. They've got the talent, they've got the pieces, and they've got to make this work when you think about everything that they gave up to get
To get
Rudy
Gobert.
Gobert from Utah. That was a lot. Okay.
Yep.
And you've got Ant-Man, and Ant-Man is a guy that again, that brother just comes on the court angry. And
Mm,
that's what you want, from your best player. You
yep.
want a guy that comes on the court angry and wants to go out there and play. And what the Timberwolves need, they probably need like about 4 or 5 more guys with that same mentality. Maybe not the same skill as Anthony Edwards, but the same mentality. And I think they will be formidable. But I still don't see them this year. Same thing for me with OKC. They're too young. That's the
Too
big
young. Too young. Yep.
I really would have liked to have seen the Thunder go out there and get a Kyle Lowry. Okay, just because The fact that he's a veteran point guard, and he's a guy that has won a championship, been to a couple of finals since he's on that. He went to the finals with the Heat last year, but they
And
decided not.
why is Boogie Cousins not in the NBA? Wouldn't somebody like Boogie have been a good veteran pickup to back up Chet? Like what you're saying makes a lot of sense. A
Yeah,
Kyle Lowry and like a Boogie Cousins or
yeah.
something like that coming off the bench to give them some veteran, not only leadership, but toughness and two guys who are skilled and can play and
Listen,
have respect of the young guys who can talk to them.
listen. These analytics nowadays, regardless of the sports, have like shown that, oh, we don't like, you try to phase these guys out of the league. But I'll tell you like this, sometimes you need a guy who's kind of been there before, to kind of like pull you aside and talk to you in a way that your coach can't. Listen,
Yep.
you've played sports before, I played sports before. There's always been, maybe like a junior or a senior guy when we were freshmen who said, hey, big fella, or hey, Ern, you know
Yeah.
what? You're doing it like this, but you need to do this, or this is what the coach is trying to tell you. Somebody who is going to take you under his wing and show you the ins and outs. I'll give you an example. The Knicks used the first overall pick on Patrick Ewing in 1985. Everybody knew Patrick Ewing was the future of the Knicks. But for Patrick Ewing's first 4 years in the NBA, in spite of the fact of how good that he was, his backup was Bill Cartwright. Okay, Bill Cartwright had already played in the league for like 5 or 6 years. And Bill Cartwright, he had to practice against him every single day. Bill Cartwright was able to show him the ins and outs. And then, of course, eventually they traded Bill Cartwright for Charles Oakley. But
Hmm.
nonetheless, you still had somebody who was there to kind of like, take you under, your
They
wing.
show you how to be a pro.
Right. When Shaquille O'Neal went to Orlando, they had Tree Rollins, and we could go right down the list of
Yeah.
so many
Over.
guys. Yeah. And, they've kind of eliminated that. Boogie, I think I'm trying to think like the best word to kind of like describe it. Cause, Boogie's got a different personality from the standpoint that, what, some people might call him a little edgy, whatever. But the thing is like, I think, you bring in a vet like that, but they've kind of like just really phased those guys out of the NBA, phased guys out of sports like that. And I think it's disgusting. You go back, we talking about OKC. They basically had Al Horford on the roster for a year just acting as a coach.
Yo,
Al
listen,
Horford,
they
Al
should have just
Horford
put.
could. Right. The man can still play. I mean, clearly he went back to Boston. You see how important that he is on that team.
But
He was an all-star caliber player in Atlanta, but this is what happens when you focus too much on the analytics.
I mean, case in point, he went back to Boston. They went to the finals.
Yeah,
Just ran up against a team that got hot at just the right time
yeah,
and had arguably a top 10 player all time in Steph Curry.
yeah.
And then you had Andrew Wiggins actually playing up to his potential in the finals. It's like, yo, dude, there was a reason Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, more specifically Jason Tatum, had problems. You're going against an Andrew Wiggins who's literally just as athletic as they are. They're,
With a crazy
people
wingspan.
highly pitched his athleticism is on the charts. They underestimate that.
Listen, Andrew Wiggins is a guy, and I don't think like some people remember this. Andrew Wiggins is one of those guys. He could have come straight out of high school to the NBA and still been the first overall pick. He
Yep.
went he went to Kansas that one year, tore it up, and of course was still the first overall pick. You're talking about a guy who has a crazy wingspan, and I think the Warriors brought the best out of him that year because when he was in Minnesota, he wasn't playing D. Andrew Wiggins was a guy along with Cat where, you know what, give me my 25 million. I'm gonna get my 20 points a night, and I'm good.
Yep.
Golden State was like, no, young fella, we do things a little bit different here because we're trying to win championships. And he bought into the culture there. And of course, the rest is history.
Yep.
So, at the end of the day, you got to put your guys in the right situation to succeed. You bring guys in for a specific reason. You got to let them do what they do. And the problem is, you know, like Einstein said, you're not going to see how good a fish is if you have a fish try to climb a tree. And the
Exactly.
problem is,
That was something that is not even built to do.
right. everybody, nowadays, all right, like they want these guys to go out there and be 3-point shooters, be perimeter players, regardless of your size. It's positionless basketball. No, you need your point guards. You need your facilitators. Okay. You need big fellas, to play close to the basket. Why am I going to sit up there and give up a back to the like a shot at a clear shot at the basket, pass it back out for a 3-point shot while I'm shooting further away from the basket, and you're telling me this based off of percentages? That's stupid basketball.
It does not make sense at all.
No. And it's like these guys, they're so fundamentally flawed because of that. They don't know how to defend the pick and roll. They don't know how to run a fast break. Most of them don't even know how to run a proper half court offense.
It's
Okay,
true. It is true.
because like there's a lot of motion involved, back picks, you name it. And that to me, I think is clearly hurting the game, and it continues to hurt the game. It's these doggone analytics, man.
Yes, hence how Golden State was able to trick everybody and get 4 championships out of LeBron's era. People got so infatuated and so enchanted with the premise of Steph Curry and Klay Thompson shooting all of those threes, right?
Hmm.
And what they didn't realize is as soon as Steph got you afraid and running out and closing out too hard of those threes, he drives. Steph finishes with either hand in the paint. He backdoor cuts. Klay is constantly moving and backdoor cutting. They backdoor cut, catch the ball on the move. And when they had guys like Javal McGee, right, throwing lobs that way, they're not just feasting off of threes. It just looks like they are. Draymond is throwing the pass for the backdoor cut. It's the double and triple screens at the top. They show the highlight of Steph shooting the three. They don't show the highlight of him catching and shot faking and stepping inside for the easy mid-range pull-up. There's a reason why Jimmy wreaks havoc in the playoffs and drags a seemingly unassuming Miami Heat all the way to the championship. The game slows down and then it becomes, can you score in the mid-range? That is why Chris Middleton is so important for the Bucks, because he is literally a guy who can get it. He can get his money in the mid-range when Giannis can't get all the way to the basket, or when Drew Holiday throws them clamps on Dame, like Drew and Rondo did when it was the Pelicans versus the Blazers. When that happens again, and now Derek White and Drew going switching off on Dame, right, causing him problems. There is no Grayson Allen. They have Malik Beasley.
Hmm.
That was another mistake because he's shooting the lights out for Phoenix.
Hmm.
That was another mistake that they made. Because if you're going to go all in on offense, they should have kept Grayson Allen. Now you have a not as good replacement. So when they throw those clamps on Dame, they're going to need a healthy Chris Middleton operating in that mid range for them to get those buckets. And then that will open up more stuff for Giannis in the dunker spot. And then Brook stretching the floor as a stretch five, pulling Porzingis away from the hoop, or Horford away from the hoop, unless they play both of them at the same time, then it's problems.
Right.
But the only revelation for the Bucks is Bobby Portis, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Bobby. Bobby is damn near, besides the superstars, Bobby is the
Hmm.
best thing that the Bucks got going.
No, listen, Bobby, Bobby Portis is one of those guys, and I go back to his days playing collegiately at Arkansas. He's a guy that you know what, he just gets it done. And it was the same thing with the Bulls. And I think, his style of play, his personality, all of that stuff, I think it fits Milwaukee like a glove.
Yep,
He could have left and gotten more money.
got
Okay.
paid.
Right. Right. And he gave up bread to try to come back there and win another championship. It might not work out, but it's like to your point, they gave up a lot to get Dame, and it better work. And I'm not sure that it is. And I mean, Grayson Allen, is one of those guys. You know, he's in Phoenix right now, a great situation. You're playing off of KD, you're playing off of Booker, you're
Deal.
playing off of Brad Beal.
Yep.
My thing is like my only worry with Phoenix because they started to get better. They're finally out of that play-in uh
Hmm.
spot. They're up to number 6 now, I do believe. Phoenix, my two biggest concerns with the Suns. You got three guys who are your best players that can't stay healthy. Okay.
Yep.
Then
Your oldest
also
out of the three is the healthiest one. That's a problem.
exactly,
That's
exactly. And then my whole thing is like who's like they don't have a point guard. And that to me is the other thing. Cause like you look at it a couple of years ago when they got to the finals, they brought in Chris Paul, and of course that changed things because prior to that, Devin Booker had never even been to the playoffs, period.
no,
It's one of those with Devin Booker as a player, he's a phenomenal scorer, but he brings nothing else to the table. Brad Beal, phenomenal scorer, but what else does he bring to the skate table?
nothing.
I look at Brad Beal, I look at KD, and I look at Devin Booker in the aspect of, you know what, you got three guys that they can't be effective without the basketball in their hands. That is a problem, and I think at some point that is going to be the downfall of the Phoenix Suns in the
So
playoffs.
KD can. KD can be effective without the basketball. The
Hmm.
problem is he's so unselfish and Booker is so aggressive. Booker will put up more attempts than KD. And it's like, no, it should be the other way around. We need arguably the most dynamic scorer we've ever seen who could
Hmm.
give it any kind of way and not even break a sweat. Kevin Durant, always being the person taking the second most shot attempts when he should be taking the most shot attempts. And that always comes back to hurt whatever team he's on. It seems like the only team who got it right was Golden State, with Steph Curry being the table setter that he is with the way that he plays the game, not necessarily his like handing out assists.
Hmm.
Had common sense, just like D Wade, to be like, no, for me to win more rings, we need to push you to the forefront.
Right,
Kevin Durant, D Wade, no LeBron. We need to push you to the
right,
forefront.
right.
We can win some more rings. That is what Phoenix has to do. And in both of those cases, you actually had point guards. It might not have been Curry, but it was Draymond.
Right.
You had the point guard. On Miami, you had D Wade, who started out as a point guard. You know what I'm saying? They
Right.
started out him as the point until essentially Shaq got there. They moved him to the two, and they
Right.
brought in Jason Williams to run the one.
Right.
Had someone who knew, oh no, I have to push like the best guy in the league. I have to remind him that, yo, dude, yeah, you're on my team, but you're still the best guy in the league. Be that, and we'll follow suit so we can win these rings. I think Phoenix has to do that same thing. But as you stated, they don't have a point guard. So I don't know how I don't know how you do that. And John
No,
Wall is still sitting at home on his couch.
listen, John Wall is another guy that got pushed out of the league, quicker than, he should have been. Listen, there's a lot of guys like that, who got pushed out of the league, prior to when they could have been, like when they should have been rather. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these guys they want to go younger, they want to go cheaper, you name it. But like I look at the Suns again, their lack of point guard is going to hurt them. Also, just the depth in the West, because I mean, we haven't even talked about the Clippers yet. And you look at the Clippers, this is a squad where you figure if they're healthy,
They have
they could be
every
a problem. Listen,
they,
because we saw it last year. Just real quick, we saw it last year in game one of that series against Phoenix. I was like, listen, I think this series is going 7 because you put Paul George on KD. KD didn't do his thing, and then of course Paul George got hurt. Kawhi didn't come back, so basically it was Russ, trying to carry the show.
And
And
remember, at first they had, all right, Paul was out.
right,
Kawhi and Russ.
right. It was
They
Kawhi.
put
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Kawhi and Russ.
Hmm.
History, all the only thing that happened was history proved to be correct. San Antonio would have beat Golden State had they not injured Kawhi, moving
Zaza,
under him when he took
Zaza
that.
Pachulia.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Kawhi has always had Durant's number.
Yeah.
He does not. Kawhi doesn't think twice when he sees Durant across the court from him. He may be the only dude who
Yeah.
does not think twice about that. I think Russ and Kawhi would have led the Clippers to a quote unquote upset of the Phoenix Suns. And then, like you said, Kawhi went down and it was
Hmm.
just Russ.
Yeah.
But they had a hell of an effort in that first round series last year.
Listen, the Clippers are like the biggest what if in the NBA. When I think about the Clippers, it's kind of like if you were playing spades and you tell your partner, I got one in three possibles. Your partner's like, okay, well, what are you gonna do with those possibles? And of course, in the case of the Clippers, it's can they stay healthy? Because
Yep.
if you're telling me, okay, Kawhi's gonna be healthy for the postseason, if you're telling me Paul George is gonna be healthy for the postseason, if you're telling me that Russ is gonna be healthy for the postseason, okay, we got something here because all three of those guys are solid perimeter defenders. James
Yep.
Harden, James Harden's still James Harden, but you know James Harden's going to do his disappearing act in the postseason. Happens all the time. Okay.
And it doesn't matter because you got Russ, who you can put in for him, and Russ is not going to disappear. And you
Right.
got Norman Powell, who can always get buckets.
Listen, and I think going to Norman Powell more, and I think having Russ come off the bench were like two big things. For the Clippers, and again, you still got Paul George and Kawhi, so I'm looking at them. And to me, with Ty Lue, I don't think Ty Lue gets enough credit as a head coach. I think too
Mhm.
often the guys who have won championships with LeBron as LeBron's head coach, I don't think they get enough credit. I don't think Eric Spoelstra gets enough credit. I don't think Ty Lue gets enough credit either. Frank Vogel was already a good coach before LeBron when he was with Indiana,
Yeah.
and of course he won that championship. But Ty Lue can coach,
Yep.
okay, and,
Best
and,
coaches
and
in the NBA are Ty Lue and Eric Spoelstra,
mhm.
especially as it pertains to making adjustments on the fly.
Yeah, so I look at the Clippers and I'm like, you know what? If these cats are healthy in 2 weeks for the postseason, listen, they're gonna be a problem because you look at the Clippers right now, they're number four. That that would be an insane first round series if the season ended today because we would be talking about the Clippers playing Dallas.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And and
Insane.
and you look at Dallas right now. Dallas looks like they're starting to figure it out. And I called it the two-man power trip with Kyrie and Luca. And it's one of those where it's either you could do what Greg Popovich did when he faced the Nuggets in the playoffs when the Nuggets had Carmelo and AI. Okay,
Mhm.
we're gonna let you guys get your 30 points apiece, but we're gonna shut down everybody else. But if Luca can get everybody else involved, okay, it's one of those where you know what, Dallas is going to be a big problem. But I
That,
would like I
that
would like to see,
Washington pickup, that
yeah,
was huge.
yeah, yeah.
Huge before the trade deadline.
Hmm.
Huge.
It's one of those moves that you know what, nobody talked about it, at the moment. But let's say Dallas gets on a run in the playoffs, you're going to sit back and like, wow, that was a big deal. you
It
know,
was a big deal.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Terry Rozier move with Miami. I don't
Yep.
think enough people talked about that. But if Miami gets on a run, and Terry Rozier is one of those spotlight guys. When the spotlight's on
Yep.
him, he comes out, then
Yes.
people are gonna look back and be like, wow, that was a big
Yes.
deal right there.
Ask,
So,
what was the name? Ask Eric Bledsoe about
oh yeah,
Terry Rozier. You know
oh
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yep.
Listen, so I'm looking at Dallas. Dallas is a very scary team. So like the West right now, it's
It's
very it really is because it's kind of like, you've got Minnesota, Denver, and OKC fighting for that one spot. But it's one of those where it's like, yeah, the one spot's all well and good, but do you really want the two spot?
that,
Maybe it's
that one spot is terrible, man.
yeah.
Like you could draw either LA or Golden State. Like that's your prize.
See,
winning first or second spot, but that first spot definitely. It's
see,
like, do you catch Golden State and Klay Thompson catches fire?
yeah. Listen, it's one of those where if you're Denver and you get that one spot and you face Golden State, I think you're okay. But if you're Minnesota and you get that one spot and you face Golden State,
Out of
that
here.
could be, yeah. If you're Minnesota and you get that two spot and you face the Lakers, that could be a problem. If you're OKC and you get that two spot and you face the Lakers, it could be a problem because the thing is it's one of those. I think it would be a great series. You're talking about, Chet Holmgren up front, but then do they really have anybody to stop, AD? And then, of course, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I think, it's one of those where we've seen this kid get busy. Now, this is going to be his opportunity to get busy, on the postseason stage where
Yeah.
everybody, remembers you. But you figure
Or
another.
test run. Did Shea Gilgis Alexander play in the summertime with Canada?
I think he did. I think he
Did
did.
he,
Hmm.
he did, because the only
Hmm.
one who sat it out was Jamal Murray.
Right. Right.
He did play in the summertime. He's
Hmm.
already test run.
Yeah. And then
Yep.
listen, another Kentucky guy. And typically when Coach Cal gets those guys in Kentucky, the one and done kids, listen, they know they're going to the NBA.
Mhm.
But they're kind of like, you know what? They're kind of built for those moments. Devin Booker, we've seen what he's done as a scorer. Jamal Murray,
Yeah.
you mentioned Boogie Cousins, who was part of that first wave that
Yeah.
Coach
Almost.
Cat, yeah,
With,
and Bledsoe, you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? But like those guys, they're kind of built for that,
I agree.
for the most part. But I'm looking at the playoffs this year. It's one of those where, some of these guys, maybe you could say they've been sandbagging it because
Mhm.
the regular season is so long, 82 games. But at the end of the day, I think now is when the intensity is going to start to ratchet up, and especially as you get deeper into the postseason, because it's kind of like, usually for the most part in the first round, it's kind of like weeding out the suckers. But
Yeah.
even though I think the first round in the West, right now could be very formidable, we're talking about right now the way that the standings are, OKC playing Phoenix. All right, Denver getting the winner of the play-in. Same thing with the Timberwolves, and then we just mentioned Clippers, Mavericks. Um, the on the East, Knicks Magic in the first round could be interesting. Knicks fans would say, okay, we can beat Orlando. Yeah, if you had, Randall, okay, I would say it's a slam dunk. And then, like we said, Miami and Philly possibly coming out of that play-in tournament. If you're
And
Boston and you're
tough. And
Milwaukee, you're
tough.
not, yeah, it's not a slam dunk.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, because it's like the last thing that Jason Tatum wants to see is Jimmy Butler in round number one. It's kind of like that LeBron gif when he was playing on the Heat and Kawhi comes back into the game and LeBron's at the free throw line. He looks over, he sees Kawhi, he's like, darn.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Exactly.
like, yeah,
Exactly.
because it's like,
Exactly.
listen, Jimmy Butler, he did it before. He punked Boston in the bubble. Okay, he took Jason Tatum's lunch money. He did it last year, and it was one of those. Listen, Jimmy is one of those guys. The way he plays ball, he plays like an old man, but it's one of those where, like, listen, we've all been around guys like that. They show up to the court in the summertime at 1 o'clock, and it's their court until they decide to go home. You're not,
Decide
you're
to
not, you're not beating them. Okay, and
leave.
that's what Jimmy Butler is. The only reason that Miami hasn't won a championship the last couple of years is the fact that, hey, they've lacked size and they
Yes.
don't have another Jimmy Butler. That's
It,
the only reason why they haven't won.
that's why they were going after Dame in the summertime. Like all the
Mhm.
summertime all the way up until uh what is it called? Training camp. Trying
Right.
to acquire Dame. That's why they were trying to acquire him, because they needed another guy who was highly pitched in those high leverage moments, just like Jimmy.
Right.
That's why. Yep.
And if they can get that guy, you know what, they're gonna be in business because you look at it last year, they got to the finals, and you're happy to see the Heat get there, but it was just a bad matchup. The Celtics would have been a better matchup
Yeah,
for the Nuggets because you figure you had Max Strus and Gabe Vincent trying to guard Jokic. I
it
mean,
was crazy.
come on, man.
It was
You
crazy.
know, nah, you know what I'm saying? They didn't have the size. Like Bam
It was
Bam,
crazy.
yeah.
And I saw it's funny you brought that up, right? Because
Hmm.
last night's game, when it was the Clippers versus the Nuggets, and just like you said, the Clippers can be a very scary team. That's the team that I want to win it all because I want to see Russ get a ring because I'm tired of people talking about Russ. I don't want him to go out like how the league made AI go out.
Hmm.
Um, they put PJ Tucker on Nikola. Yeah, Nikola got his numbers, right? Yeah, you got your numbers, right? You got your numbers. Congratulations. You're supposed to get your numbers, and you're that great.
Hmm.
He gave him fits when Nikola catches the ball on the perimeter, right? And then they had Zubac waiting for him at the rim.
Right.
Clippers have three guys in which they could do that. They got Zubac, they got Daniel Tice, and they got Plumlee. You are right. They're built to win it right now. Like they can win this thing right now if healthy. They do have what it takes. They have three bigs to throw at Embiid, Anthony Davis, Giannis, Nikola. They have three bigs. That's 15 fouls. It's almost like those Shaq rules. Do you have 15 fouls to throw at them?
Listen, that's what Phil. That listen, Phil Jackson got out of the East all of those years with the Bulls with Michael Jordan, based off of the fact that you know what, I got three 7-footers. That's 18 fouls on Shaq. That's 18
Yep.
fouls on Patrick Ewing. You know what? If you get 10 points out of those guys, so be it. Just listen, Shaq's gonna get his 30. Just make him work for it. That's it. And if two of those three guys foul out, so be it.
Yep. Yep.
You know,
Because
you
we
know.
have advantage on the perimeter.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what it comes
So
down to. Clippers.
yeah, it listen, if they can stay healthy, that's the biggest if. And like honestly, I had this discussion with people last year because it was the same thing with the Nuggets. If they could stay healthy, because we've seen what they can do in the playoffs, and finally last year they were able to stay healthy.
Jamal Murray.
That
Jamal
was
Murray is the
listen,
key.
some guys are just built for the postseason. Jamal Murray, another Kentucky guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the
Other
bigger the
Kentucky.
stage, the better he plays. That's it. You know what I'm saying? So I'm looking at them. Um, the playoffs are going to be very exciting, you know, and you know because these guys sleepwalk, you know, through the bulk of the regular season, you know, because they basically told the fans that the regular season and the All-Star game, of course, really
Don't count. It's not.
exactly
Yeah.
right, and it's sad because you know these guys are getting paid, they're getting paid well, and they're getting paid off of the sweat and blood and tears of the generations, plural, that came before them that set it up.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? But they don't, you know, they don't play that hard in the regular season.
Hey,
But
some of them don't play at all. Look at Ben Simmons.
listen,
Disgusting.
don't even get me started there. I mean, now they're upset that the NBA implemented the 65 game, you know, minimum, you know, for for individual awards, and I'm like, listen, you need to be mad at your contemporaries,
Yep.
you know, for not showing up to play. It's one of those for me. I refuse to go to an NBA game, not because I don't want to watch, but my whole thing is a lot of these teams, they charge you differently for the tickets based off of who the opponent is.
Yep.
And if I'm gonna sit up there and I'm gonna pay $80 for myself, and I'm gonna take my two kids and I'm gonna take my wife, okay, that's $320 right there for tickets, not to mention concessions and all this
Yep.
other stuff.
Parking.
So right. And then I get to the game and oh, LeBron's not playing tonight. Guess what? I don't get that money back.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and that's a problem right there. You know, I went to games, you know, as a kid in the NBA, and I'm like, listen, the star players that will advertise on the marquee, guess what? You were going to see those guys, and if you
Yep.
didn't see them, it was advertised like, okay, Michael Jordan's out, okay, Reggie Miller's out, Charles Barkley's out, whomever. but you were going to see those guys. So it's unfortunate. Just changing gears real quick, I will say, because some people are like, well, they need to reduce the amount of games for the regular season. The owners would never go for that because then the TV money is going to decrease as well.
Exactly.
I think what should happen, it's not going to happen because of the union and the collective bargaining, but they need to treat it like a regular job. I've had jobs before where guess what? If you ain't show up, you ain't get paid.
Yeah,
So you're
you
right.
get done.
Right. And there was no sick time. There was no vacation time.
Hmm.
So it's one of those where you know what? You had to show up and play. But I think, these guys, of course, have gotten, too comfortable with that. They're worried about their brand. They're worried about getting hurt. They're worried about other business ventures, which is all well and good. But at the end of the day, if your main source of income is what you're doing on the court, you got to go out there and produce. These guys are worried about extending their careers, okay, for maybe 15 years or 20 years. The guys in a different era didn't play as long because they
They,
played they played both sides of the ball and they
yep,
showed up every single night to play.
yep,
Okay,
yep.
this garbage about now, well, you know what? This two-way player and all this other crap. I don't know where this came from. I'm like, listen, guys played D. Okay. God, like there's no communication on D. Guys don't know how to switch. Guys don't know how to play off of pick and rolls. Guys don't even know how to box out for rebounds.
It's true.
Okay. Yeah, and it's like guys don't it's again, you say these things and the youngsters are like, oh, you're an old head, oh, you're hating. No, it's true. The fundamentals are not there. The fundamentals are gone.
I
Okay.
agree.
And this is why I'm a proponent of not comparing guys from different eras to each other because the game was different. The game was different now than it was in the 90s. The game in the 90s was different than it was in the 60s or the 70s. Guys need to get up off of that. But I think, we get caught up in this, oh, who's the GOAT, who's this, that, and the third. And like, for me, it's one of those where I think cats nowadays, we throw around certain terms too often as far as like, oh, this guy's in the GOAT conversation. This guy's in the GOAT conversation. Oh, this guy's a Hall of Famer. I'm like, listen, those things are for like the elites of the elite. Okay,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying? And it's like, yo, we're throwing it around like too
Way
much.
too.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, which like we're basically handing it out like it's a participation trophy. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, that's just my take on it, man.
Got you. Got you. And when they talk about that, the GOAT conversation, and essentially it's just between LeBron and Jordan, right? I don't even think it's a conversation. And I think it's unfair, in all actuality, to LeBron, because I think that his actual greatness gets diminished because people are comparing him to Mike. The only ones you can actually compare to Michael Jordan, in my opinion, don't even play his sport. It would have to be Brady, Gretzky, Muhammad Ali, and I guess this guy, what's the tennis player
Uh,
now?
Novak,
Novak or
no,
something like that.
Novak Djokovic.
It's those guys. Like
Mhm.
those are his only contemporaries. And then LeBron is, I would say now, the second greatest player of all time, basketball wise. But then the conversation is so complex because if an older guy, say somebody in their 70s, says, I don't care what none of y'all say, yeah, LeBron passed Kareem on the all time scoring list. Kareem is the greatest basketball player to have ever played at every level of basketball. You can't argue against that. He won everything in high school, he won everything in college, he won everything there is to win in the NBA. And he has the most unstoppable shot there has ever been. So it's wild. It's more complex than what they make it out to be. I think people need to just sit back and enjoy greatness for what it is, because it's not going to last forever.
No, it won't. And I will say this about LeBron. LeBron is one of the greatest players ever. I'm not going to say he's the
Ever.
greatest. In my opinion, he is one of the greatest, though, yes. But I think it's ridiculous when people try to compare LeBron to Mike, two different eras of basketball, two different
Mhm.
styles of play, because there's nothing similar. I feel like if you're going to compare somebody to somebody, you have to compare them to somebody that
Who's
played.
similar,
Right.
right?
And I'm like, honestly, if we're going to compare Mike to anybody, it should be Kobe.
That's it.
That because like Kobe basically, you could see it. Kobe took that "Come Fly with Me" tape that Mike had and
Like
watched it
the Bible.
religiously. Right. He chewed his gum like Jordan, had his wristbands on like Jordan,
Every,
walked like Jordan, talked like Jordan. He had the post moves, all of that stuff.
everything.
We like honestly, we never saw a guy like LeBron prior to him coming into the NBA. And like because of that, you really can't sit up there and compare him to somebody. But I don't like when people are trying to compare LeBron to Mike and they're trying to tear down what either guy did. It's like you hear some of
Doesn't
these
make sense.
you hear older cats who didn't like Michael Jordan who want to try to tear down the fact that, well, he didn't get past the Pistons. He did get past the Pistons. Okay. It's just the fact that, he worked his butt off to do it. And people can say, well, by the time he got past the Pistons, they were an old team. Well, guess what? By the time the Pistons got past the Celtics and Lakers, they were
They were.
old as well. All right.
This is how
So,
the jungle works.
right,
This is
right,
lions from the king of the jungle. They take
right,
the older lion's pride, but not
right.
until the lion starts to get older.
Right. You know what I'm saying? And you look at LeBron and it's just like, okay, played in a different era, okay, different style of game. And I tell people all the time, you have to be very careful when you start comparing people to people, especially when it's different styles. Michael Jordan had a mindset where I'm going to score 40 points on you, but then I'm going to limit you to 4 points as well.
Exactly.
And see, this is why I laugh when these younger cats. I actually got in an argument with a guy a couple of weeks ago because he tried to tell me that Steph's Warriors would have destroyed Mike's
No,
Bulls. No,
their
because
73 win team versus Mike's 72 win team,
nah,
who actually ended that season winning a championship. They're crazy.
I tell people all the time, Mike and Scotty were a first team All NBA defense darn near every year in the 1990s.
And how
We're
about Dennis?
talking, I was getting Rodman as well. Listen, people, younger cats don't understand this. I saw Dennis Rodman in his prime guard Scottie Pippen, Dominique Wilkins, Charles
Magic?
Barkley, Magic, Shaquille O'Neal, and do well. Dennis Rodman, in my opinion, okay, aside from being the greatest rebounder ever,
Of all
is
time.
right, is one of the greatest perimeter defenders as well. I don't
WWE
think I don't think people give Dennis Rodman credit enough for being the athlete that he was. Okay.
supreme, like supreme athleticism, like
Right.
of the food chain athleticism.
Right. And you figure Dennis Rodman, was one of those guys where you could just pencil him in for 15 rebounds. The man led the NBA in rebounding for 7 consecutive years. Okay. And that was half of the time with him joking around.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So I don't think people, give a guy like Rodman the credit that he deserved. Then, you had, a Ron Harper on that team. And of
Yep.
course, these young guys nowadays don't realize Ron Harper pre-knee injuries with the Cleveland Cavaliers
Like 25 again.
was a bad dude. Okay. You know,
Yep.
and then you had a Steve Kerr coming off the bench. And then, Phil Jackson always had three centers on deck, and then we didn't even mention to the Tony Kukoc factor, a
So now
6'11" guy
a
with the
6'11
handle.
point guard. So this is a guy who, if he was playing today, would be a max player,
Oh
and he
yeah,
would be considered a point forward. He would be considered your team's point guard. Same as
yes,
Lamar Odom. Lamar Odom would be a max player today, and he would not be a point forward. He would be your team's point guard. Lamar Odom is what they wished Ben Simmons
yep,
was.
Listen, people don't understand. You know, you played ball before.
Yep.
A lot of those guys have crazy growth spurts. Scottie Pippen went to college as a point guard, and he had one summer where, you know, he grew from 6'1" to 6'7". You know, Lamar Odom had one of those crazy growth spurts as well, which is why, you know, he had the handle that he
Yep.
did at 6'11". And you know, it was kind of like the gift and the curse when, you know, Lamar played that one year at Rhode Island and they beat Temple to win the A10 tournament. And, you know, John Chaney called Lamar Odom the next Magic Johnson. That was the worst thing that John
That
Chaney
hurt.
ever could
That
have
hurt.
done, you know,
Yeah, it
because,
hurt.
yeah, exactly. But, you know, Lamar was just that talented and he did it as a lefty.
Yes.
You know,
Kukoc. Remember,
yeah,
Kukoc left.
exactly. Yeah.
Kukoc.
You know, so it's one of those where you bring in a guy like Kukoc, as skilled as he was. This is why, again, you know, cats are like too quick to try to compare eras and try to say, oh, this guy's the greatest, this guy's the greatest. No, 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 no. I'm like this with those Bulls. First of all, Draymond would have been a non-factor. Dennis
Non-fact.
Dennis Rodman would have done his antics, and Draymond would have gotten thrown out.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
you know. Again, Scotty. People don't understand how good of a defender Scottie Pippen was.
Yeah. You would have
And
Scotty, either Scotty or Ron Harper all over Steph. So I'm guessing Ron would have been on Steph and Scotty would have been on Clay. I'm guessing.
I would have imagined they probably would have put Scotty on KD, but just because Scotty was a little bit taller than Ron,
Ah,
and you know he had the length, and
yep.
and then the thing is, we haven't even brought up Mike on the defensive end because when Mike pulled up those shorts and Mike gave you the stare,
And got into his stance.
it was over.
Yep.
It was over. I always remember the J.R. Ryder story with Michael Jordan. I don't know if you were familiar with that one.
What happened
Now,
with that? I don't think so.
okay, so basically J.R. Ryder was on the Timberwolves, KG's on the Timberwolves, and then KG's over there talking smack, telling J.R. Ryder what Mike can't do to him. And Mike heard that. And J.R. Ryder's looking at like, hold on, wait a minute. That wasn't me. That was him who was saying that.
Oh, I did hear that
Yeah.
story. Mm, you gonna
And
get me murdered out here.
and then you know Mike turned around and cooked him. I think for me the most one of the most infamous Michael Jordan stories I ever heard came from the mouth of Byron Scott. He talked about I think this was his last year with the Lakers, first time around, and he was at the morning shoot around, but he had a bad hamstring, so he was just trying to see if he can give it a go or a bad ankle or something. So he said when he was leaving the Forum to go home to get dressed for the game, the Bulls bus was pulling up for the shoot around. So then Mike saw him in the parking lot. He's like, B Scott, what's up? You gonna give it a go tonight? He was like, I don't know, M. My ankle. So then he was like, okay, who's guarding me? And he said, Anthony Peeler. And he's like, the rookie? And he was like, 50. And Byron Scott was talking to Anthony Peeler prior to the game. Listen, don't crowd him, don't agitate him, do all of this stuff. Mike was basically scoring on them during the game and looking back at them like talking crap. And I think when that game was over, I think Mike finished with like 54 or 55 points.
Like
And then
that.
and he looked over at Byron Scott and said, I told you.
Yeah, just like he said he would. And now that I think about it, with those matchups, I think it would have been even more of a problem because you don't have to guard Draymond. So I actually think Rodman would have been on KD.
Oh yeah.
Yep, Rodman
And
would have been on KD.
listen again, guys don't understand the importance of having a good perimeter defender. We just
Hmm.
speaking of that, we just saw the announcement of this year's basketball Hall of Fame class. Michael Cooper, okay, is going in, and as good as those Showtime Lakers were offensively, they were as good defensively. And I don't think people like, especially this generation, understand
That
how good of a perimeter defender
Michael
that
Cooper.
and how important that he was for those Laker championship teams. You need that guy. You
And
need
thinking, wasn't Michael Cooper like a scoring all-star before he even came to the Lakers?
Michael Cooper could score, you know what I'm saying? But it was like the thing was, it was like Coop, you know, Coop, like a lot of other guys, they knew how to sacrifice, their games in order to win. And again, this to like not to go off on a tangent, but this is what happens when you play organized ball. And I say organized ball from the standpoint these guys were coming into the NBA as 3 or 4 year college players.
Yes.
You play college ball. So
Yep.
you know you have to learn a system.
Yep.
I'm saying it's not just about what you want to do. And that's the problem with a lot of these guys nowadays. Is basically if the coach tells them something that they don't want to hear, they getting the coach up out of there. And a lot of these guys, they haven't taken the time to learn the system. For Golden State, Steph was a 3 year college player. So was Clay. Draymond was a 4 year player at
Yep.
Michigan State. And you weren't going to play ball for Tom Izzo and not know your ins and outs of basketball. And I think that's something that, people really tend to overlook. And I think now it's showing up a lot in the NBA. And I think this is why now, so many international players are part of the reason why so many international players have been able to succeed. Because I think what the last 5 or 6 MVP winners have all been non-US born players.
Foreign
Yeah,
born play. Yeah.
yeah,
Because they
yeah.
grew up playing professional basketball ever since like Tony Parker playing since he was 14 in the French leagues.
Hmm.
That's how they've grown up. As soon as they show the talent and a little bit of size to where they could potentially play with grown men,
Hmm.
they're put into those quote unquote basketball academies. Look at Luca.
Oh
He
yeah.
came already like ready to be what it is that he became or
Listen.
he becoming.
It's only a matter of time before Luca is your NBA MVP. If you told me this year that Luca was going to be the MVP, I wouldn't be surprised. I
Got
really wouldn't. It's only a matter of time
yeah,
uh, before he does that, and then he adds to the foreign born players who are taking home the MVP awards.
yeah, it's gonna happen. It's inevitable. He's gonna get at least one. He's
Oh,
definitely gonna get at least one. Well, I think we covered a lot. Oh, I think this was a lot of great content, a lot of great talking points that we brought up. I can't wait for us to do it again.
listen. It was a pleasure. Like I said, you and I, like when we started off, you and I probably haven't like talked in close to 20 years. But
Yes,
it's one of those where when you know how somebody is, you don't skip a beat.
exactly.
You
You
know,
pick up.
li- right. I ain't played basketball in a while. I probably give you like probably like 5 minutes of good quality basketball. But if I did play with you, I know exactly what you're gonna
What I
do.
want to do. Yeah, and how we need to operate. Exactly. Exactly. I echo those sentiments. Well, want to plug some of your socials? Tell like the viewers where they can find you, your podcast, your blog.
Listen. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's the first time, and I guarantee you, it ain't going to be the last time on
No
here.
way.
Listen, definitely not. Anybody who's on YouTube, just check me out at 300 pounds of sports knowledge. It's one of those where I'll tell everybody I try to be the total sports package for the total fan. We talk a little bit of everything on there. NBA, college basketball, NFL, college football, auto racing, tennis, boxing, Major League Baseball. I come at it from a lot of different angles on there, and anybody who checks it out will definitely see. It's one of those where I guarantee you, every podcast you're going to see a different fitted hat on my head, just like you see right now, and the jersey's always changed behind me as well. So you never know what you're going to see, but you do know what you're going to hear from me on 300 pounds of sports knowledge.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Again, this was Brothers Talking NBA Basketball podcast. We had a great time talking shop, talking basketball, and I can't wait to speak to you all again. Peace.